Hello there, and a very warm welcome to another video from Change Tips and Tools. This video is number 7 and the final part of the resource capacity planning series with me, Phil, the Brummie that hails from Birmingham, England. And again, remember, I will continue to go through this training series as an end-to-end project, not skipping any detail, and I will walk you through step by step on how to build this template for yourself. However, if you can't wait until the end of this training series, you can get a copy of the completed template on the Change Tips and Tools Patreon, and the link can be found in the description along with the chapters and the support materials for this video. Now, the purpose of today's video is to ensure the accuracy of data input through data validation techniques to prevent, where possible, user error and therefore bad data within our resource capacity planning template. And by the end of this video, you will learn some tips and advanced data validation techniques along with Visual Basic automation to put the finishing touches on our template. But hold that thought. I have learned that based on the analytics of this channel is that only 27% of you are subscribed, which means that 73% of you are not. So can I please ask you to take a moment to subscribe and hit that like button if you haven't already, as it really helps the channel immensely. A big thank you for the support and the positive feedback and visiting my channel. I'm so grateful to you all. Now, enough of my shameless self-promo. Let's get back to the video. In this video, we will focus on the finishing touches to our resource capacity planning template. We are going to look at the static data through to the resource demand and look at the individual tables, and we're going to use some advanced data validation techniques and also put some conditional formatting in these tables to ensure the data is as clean and as accurate and fit for purpose as possible before we put it into Power Query and into our Power Pivot and our data model. Once we've done all that validation, we'll then look at the protection of this, and that's where we will dive into Visual Basic, and we'll walk through it step by step, and we'll create our protection and Unprotect capabilities of this spreadsheet, and also automate the data refresh, i.e. you click the button, it will take care of all the protection, make sure it runs, and then it will then reprotect the sheet once that data refresh has been done. So that's what we're going to focus on this video. So without further ado, let's do this. So let's take care of that conditional formatting and additional data validation to ensure that the data is clean before it goes into Power Query and protects those one-to-many relationships in Power Pivot. So let me give an example here what we're going to do. So let's use the programs one, because I think that's going to be an easier one to do this example. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to put some conditional formatting on this. So we've already done all the protection, so we don't need to worry about that. So I'm going to select the first cell, hold down the Shift and Control button, press the down arrow, and then press down arrow again. And then what I'm going to do is on the home ribbon, conditional formatting, I'm going to highlight cells and rules, and I'm going to do duplicate values. So here it's duplicate, so light red fill with a dark red text. And I click OK. And what that does is if I type program A, it then highlights the two duplications here. But we know, user error, we need to put something else a little bit more substantial in there to protect this. So let me just delete that so it goes away. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to do data validation. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to type the formula out first before I put it into the data validation, because we're going to do some custom validation here. And I'm going to use the countifs function here. So if I do equals count if, the range is going to be table column. So I'm going to table program, open square bracket, programs as the column, and then close that square bracket. So that's my range, and then my criteria is going to be the first cell here, which is going to be F5 there. So if I type F5 like so, and I close that, it should just give me a count of 1. Now I'm going to change this slightly because I want to put this into the data validation, and as we know, data validation does not like the table reference. So what we're going to do in here is I'm going to wrap that in an indirect function. So I'm going to do indirect, open bracket, I'm going to do the quotation marks. Then after the table's reference, I'm going to do another quotation mark and close that bracket. And then what I want to do is make a statement here, equals 1. So we can only have one count in there. I'm going to hit return. So that's now saying true. And that's what we want. So if I take that formula and do control copy, escape, I can delete it from there. I don't need it anymore. And then if I select this table, so I'm going to hold down the shift and control key, do down arrow once and then again, and then I'm going to go to the data ribbon. Under data validation, I'm going to select data validation. Now before we work with lists, etc. in here, but we're not going to use a list, we're going to use custom. I'm going to paste that formula under custom, so I'm going to do control V, like so. And now, as far as the error alert, I'm just going to put a title, same as the column, so programs. I'm going to put an error message to say, must be a unique value, like so, and click OK. So now when I enter program A, watch what happens. I get this error message saying it must be a unique value. It also highlights where it appears in the table, like so. So I can hit cancel. So that's what we're trying to do, prevent that user error. So I'm going to put that same type of validation. So let's do it for the categories as well. So again, type out the formula. So I'm going to do count if. My range is going to be the table portfolio category. The column is going to be the category that we're checking. So that's my range, and then the criteria is going to be that first cell, which is going to be C5. Now I'm going to close that, do equals 1. I should get a true, and then I'm just going to wrap this in the indirect function here. So I'm going to do indirect, open that quotation mark, and then after the table reference, do quotation mark and close that bracket to close off that indirect function and hit return. So that's all good. And I'm going to take that, control copy, escape, delete it from that cell, don't need it anymore. And again, I'm going to hold down the shift and control button, do the down arrow and then down again. And then data validation, so on the data ribbon, under the data validation options, I'm going to choose data validation. In the settings, I'm going to do custom. Just paste that formula in. And as far as the error alert, I'm just going to put category. Unique value again. There's the error message and click OK. I'm also going to do the conditional formatting. So again, do the drop down, highlight cells with rules, duplicate values, and again select the default, the light red fill with dark red text. click OK. So that's that one done. Then we do the same for the projects. Right, so there's my formula for the projects table. Again, copy that, escape, delete it, take the projects table, first row, shift and control down and down again. I'm going to do duplicate values like so, and I'm going to go to the data ribbon, data validation options, to settings and custom, paste in that formula, error alert, must be a unique value, and click OK. So that's done. So again, if I do project 1, boom, done. Right, okay. So we've done conditional formatting on the category, programs and projects. Now let's look at the cross-reference table. So what we don't want is to recreate this relationship. So within here, in the drop down, we've already done, now I don't like that where it's just doing a calc, because what it's saying is it can't find, because what it's doing is excluding anything as far as the projects list that's already been used in this table. So what we want to do, I just want to change that because I don't like the way it looks. So I'm going to right click on a tab, do unhide, and we want the static data support. I'm going to click OK. And there you go. So all I'm going to do is to tell it if it can't find anything here in this filter, what to put if it doesn't find it. I'm just going to do 2 quotation marks, in other words, leave it blank. Return, that calc error goes away, and then I can rehide that, and then go back to my static data. And now when I do the drop down, there's nothing there. Cool. So we know we can't have duplications in there because you can only have one instance of that through the drop down. It stops the user doing that, so that's fine. Then on here, let's do the same thing here. Let's do the formula. So I'm going to do equals count if. Range is going to be the skill set table. Column will be skill set. So that's open square bracket, close that square bracket. So that's my range, and then it's going to be Q5 value. And close that bracket equals 1. Get that true. And then just going to wrap that in an indirect function there. Right, so there's my formula for the skill sets validation. So I'm going to take that, control copy, escape, then delete it because I don't need it anymore. Again, I'm going to select table all the way down, do the data validation options, choose data validation, settings, choose custom, paste in that formula, the error alert, and again, let's call this skill set so it's the same as the column, and then must be a unique value, click OK, then go to the home ribbon, do conditional formatting, highlight cell rules and choose duplicate values, and again select that light red fill, click OK. So again you can see that works. Don't need to do it there because we're only ever having 2 values in there. Now we need a type of different data validation in here. because again, if somebody enters in something that's not a date, then we need to make sure that this picks it up, otherwise it could cause the data refresh to error out, and we don't want that. So one of the things I'm going to do here again is I'm going to go to static data support. I'm going to reopen that, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a start date here. So I'm going to unhide static data support, and what I'm going to put is a validation date. So I want this to be the date that we use for checking if it's a valid date in there, and also that we're not putting a ridiculous date in there. So what I'm going to do, because we're in 2024, so I'm not going to do any resource planning from 23 backwards. So I'm going to put the 31st of December 2023, like so. So that's what I'm going to put there. I'm going to leave that open for now, because I want to, it's in static data support. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually give this a name. So I'm going to call this range date check. Yeah. So R date check, hit return. So I've just given that cell a name, range there. Okay. And then all I've got to do now in static data is I'm going to put some data validation in. So I make sure it's a valid date, but also to make sure they're not putting something prior to 2024. For the date, we're going to make sure that this date is greater than what's in static data support. So where we've created this date, this name range, that's what we're going to do a check against. So if I do data validation, options and data validation, I'm going to choose date. What I'm going to do is greater than from the drop down, and I'm going to do equals. And if you can't remember the name that you've given it, you can't remember exactly, you can press the F3 key to bring up the name. So there it is, our date checks. If I select that and click OK, and then click, and then let's do an error here. And I'm going to put start as the title, must be a valid date. Yeah, I'll do OK. And what that means then is if I enter just rubbish in there, it should just give me an error message. Yeah, so now as far as the finish date, we need to make sure the finish date is greater than the start date. So in the data validation, we're going to point it to this as far as making sure it's greater than. So again, with the finish date selected, I'm going to do data validation again, settings, I'm going to choose date. And again, it's got to be greater than, and I'm going to take this here, and I'm just going to hit that cell there. So it's U5. I'm going to do the drop down to enter it in, or the pointing down arrow. That looks fine, and I'm going to do an error alert again. Just put finish as the title, and I'm going to say must be a valid date greater than the start date. So we give the user some information like so, and click OK. So now if I put something in there like 12 2 3, there you go. Even though it doesn't recognize it, so I do cancel, and that's fine. So now we've got data validation in there to ensure that we're not getting a problem there. Yeah. Now with the national holidays, we want to make sure we don't have duplicates, but also we want it to be a valid date. So I've got some multiple criteria here. So what I'm going to do is to do the first one, so obviously the duplication, so let's just do the conditional formatting. Select that area, do home ribbon and do conditional formatting and select duplicate values. Again, select those defaults so we get the duplicates, but I also want to make sure that we don't have any errors as far as the date. So what you can do is force an error. So because I can't do, so if I do data validation, I can either choose a custom or I can either choose a date or whatever in the drop down. So if I do data validation, so data ribbon, data validation, the problem we've got if I'm going to do multiple criteria validation here is that I can only choose one option here. So the only way I'm going to do this is through the custom option, and I'm going to use a nested function here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the AND function, because what I want to understand is, so do the first one, which is the count, because I don't want any duplicates. So I'm going to do count if my range again is going to be the table bank holidays. I'm going to choose the bank holiday option column here and then close that square bracket. So that's my range. That's going to be Y5. Yeah, so Y5 like so. Close that bracket and do equals 1. That's my first criteria. So here I just need to do the indirect function. So if I do indirect, open that bracket, do the quotation marks, close them after the table reference, and then close that bracket to complete that indirect. So that's the first test that I want to do. The next one is I want to make sure it's a valid date. So I can't use the date validation function in data validation. So I need to create my own. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do equals. I'm going to get the week number here. And again, I'm going to use Y5 like so. So I now should get a week number. And then what I'm going to do is do a test. So all I'm going to do on that test, say is greater than 0, like so, and I get true. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to, so let's take that one there and I'm going to copy it, yeah, and then I'm going to use the AND function. So you can do AND or, so I'm using the AND because I want both statements to be true. So I'm going to go AND, open bracket, so the first test is that true, and then comma, I'm going to do Control V, that's got to be true. So that is my check. So that's my formula. So if I take that and I do Control copy, escape, and then if I then select these cells, do Shift Control down the arrow again, do data validation options, data validation, and I'm going to do custom, and then what I'm going to do is do Control V like so. On the error, must be a unique value and valid date. Yeah, and then I'm going to click OK. So now if I type something's not a date, it should give me an error and tell me it must be an actual date. So again, it stops me from entering nonsense in there. But also if I put 01/24, which is this one here, it'll also tell me it's a duplication. So that's how I would handle by using this AND function, which is then giving me, and if I did OR, it would then, basically I'm saying one of these has to be true. Yeah. So that's what I'm using, is the nested function there to do multiple criteria against my data validation. So there's a tip for you. So let's come out of that. Let's delete that. And let's delete that. So on my static data, that's all the data validation that I need to do on that one. So next, I want to do my data validation on my resources table. So this one's again is going to be a little bit simple. I'm just making sure I enter the resource only once in here. So let's just do the formula equals count if table resources. I'm going to do it against the resource column. Close that square bracket. So that's my range. The criteria is going to be B4. Close that bracket, equals 1. Comes back true, and again wrap that in an indirect function. Open that quotation marks and then close the quotation marks at the end of the table reference and close that bracket and hit return. So that's my formula. I'm going to take that, I'm going to control copy, escape, and I'm going to delete it because I don't need it. And I'm going to shift, I'm going to select the first cell in that row under resources, do shift and control and down arrow, and then down arrow again. And I'm going to do data validation, do custom, paste in that formula. As far as the error alert is concerned, I'm going to do resources, again with the error message. Must be a unique value, and click OK. I'm going to go to the home ribbon, conditional formatting, and then highlight duplicate values like so. And again, as soon as I type that in, I get the error. It isn't case sensitive either, just showing you that. Okay, let's now do the standard hours. So we need to make sure that we are entering a number in here as well. So on the data validation again, so I'm going to do select the first cell, shift and control, down again. On data validation ribbon, I'm going to do data validation, select a decimal, and it has to be greater than or equal to 0 there. Do and let's do an error message. Number and click OK. Wonderful. That's the data validation done on our resources. Now let's look at our capacity. So we've got a number of things in here that could mess with our Power Query and our Power Pivot data model. So on this one, we're okay because it only shows those resources that are available. Let me hide that static data support. Hide that. So on resource capacity, if I unhide resource capacity support in here, again, I'm just going to put at the end of that, if it can't find anything, just leave it blank so we don't get that error message. Yeah, and then I'm going to hide that again. So in the resource capacity, we don't need to worry about that because the data validation, the drop down takes care of that, the filter. But we do need to make sure that these dates here are valid. So again, I'm simply going to do shift control key, do the down arrow, then do the down arrow again. And again, I'm just going to go into data ribbon, data validation, choose a data validation option. In settings, I'm going to do date, and it's got to be greater than, and again, if I do equals and then press the F3 key, choose that R date check, click OK. So it means then we don't have to change it in one place if we're always referring to where this validation is. We'd have to change the individual data validation, if that makes sense. And again, error alert, put start as the title, same, must be a valid date. Click OK. As far as the finish column, a bit like we did in the date range as far as the start and finish on the static data, we just need to make sure this is greater than this here. Now, or is at least equal to it, as it were. So all I've got to do here is, again, select the first cell on that row, do Shift and Control, down arrow, then down arrow again, go to my data validation, settings, date. So here I'm going to choose greater than or equal to, and then I'm going to hit the up arrow here, and I'm going to select that cell there. You'll notice there's no dollar signs, it's not absolute, so it will move with the validation all the way down accordingly. Then I'm going to hit this downward arrow to enter it in. As far as the error alert, I'm going to put finish. Oh. And the message must be a valid date greater than or equal to the start date. Yeah. Click OK, and there you go. So I've now done the data validation on these. Next, I want to make sure they're entering numbers in here and not letters or any rubbish, because that again will cause it to error out. So I'm just going to select these cells here and then do Control and Shift and then down again. So there's a simple data validation we do here. So data validation options, data validation. I'm going to choose decimal, so it must be a decimal number basically, yeah. And if I then do is greater than or equal to 0, so it's not a negative number, then error message, hours, let's put capacity hours there, capacity hours must be a valid number, and do OK. Which basically means now if I try and put text in there, again it'll error. So, but if I put 7 in, it's fine. Right. I haven't put it on the sum stuff because that's a protected cell anyway, and they won't be able to enter that in. Now, let's look at our planned and unplanned leave. Now, this one's not so simple because we've got a name, and you can have that name in multiple times, but what we're trying to look for is something that's the same between these two cells here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to scroll over a little bit because I'm going to use the concat function. So narrow that row. I'm not going to do it right next to it because it'll turn it into a column. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do equals concat, and then I can select, I just want that, and then select those first 3 columns there. It's put in the table reference, but that's fine, don't worry about that. And then I'm just going to close that bracket, and it returns. So now I've got a unique reference made up of the name and the 2 dates, and that's what we want to check there's no duplications. So I'm just going to hold down the shift key and do page down, all the way down to the bottom, and do control down. So now I've got those there. So in this field, this is where I want to do the count, but I want to do the count slightly different here. So let me just make this a little bit wider so you can see what I'm doing. Is I want to count that to say, right, in this range, so has that appeared more than once? And it's almost as we're entering it down, I just want to double check whether I'm getting a duplicate of that. So the way that I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do equals count if my range is going to be this here. So I'm going to choose that cell. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to press the F4 key to fix it. Then I'm going to do a colon and then do U4. Yeah. And do colon and then do U4 like so. So when I drag it down, this will stay the same, but this will move down with the rows. So that's my range. Then obviously the criteria is going to be U4. Now if I do that like so, and if I drag this down all the way, and if I do just double click on that, it should just go all the way down to the bottom. Now what you'll see, it's counting the blanks there, so I don't want that. So what I want to do now is put an if statement in there, do if, so if U for 2 outward facing arrows is not blank, then do it. If not, just make it 0. Yeah. And just copy that down again. Boom. So I've now got that works. So soon as I put, if I start putting Jane in there and do 02, 01, 24, and then do 02/01/24, you can see it's picking up there's more than one of that. So that's what we want. Brilliant. So let me just delete those. So select them, just do delete, clean that out. So what I want to happen now is I'm going to do some conditional formatting. So let me just make that a little bit thinner, like so. This one here, I'm going to put, first of all, is I'm going to do equals, I'm going to do equals max. So I want to get the max value, right, from here. So, and the cell, smooth that out of the way. So that cell there, all the way down, close that brackets. So what I'm counting is that range there, what's the max number? Now what I want to check, if that number is greater than 1 anywhere, then I want to display an error message. So I'm going to do if that is greater than 1, then duplicates, like so. Put that message there. If not, just make it blank and hit return. And then what I'm going to do with that is I'm going to make it red and bold, and then I'm going to do some conditional formatting in these cells. So I'm going to do Control Shift and down to select them all, and what I'm going to do, conditional formatting, new rule, I'm going to use a formula, and again so I'm going to do equals if Let's get the cell reference up here. If that, I don't want the dollar signs. Get rid of the dollar signs because it's got to be relative. Is greater than 1, then true, do something. Otherwise false, don't do anything with the formatting. If I hit return, and then as far as the format's concerned, or fill, sorry, I'm just going to make it red, like so, and click OK, and then click OK. And now if I put Jane Smith 02/01/24, 02/01/24, it comes up. Now, this doesn't look particularly great with all these numbers, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do that, highlight those two, hold the shift and control with those two cells selected, and do down arrow, and I'm going to do control 1, and I'm going to do custom, and to make that disappear I'm just going to do 3 semicolons, 2, 3 in there, and click OK. So now it's not showing anything, and then I can just shrink that down. So now if we do put a duplication in there, what it's going to do, it's going to show duplicates, then show a this red square here next to where we've got the problem, like so. If I get rid of this and do delete, it's gone. So that's another approach to based on duplications across a row. So that's now the resource capacity sheet done. Wonderful. Let's do the data validation on the resource demand and the formatting. So again, the problems that we've got here, or the things that we want to make sure, is that this is a valid date, that this date is a valid date and it's greater than the start date or equal to it, and that we've got and these are valid numbers. So again, these are all taken care of. So let's look at resource demand support. So yeah, these are all taken care of. We don't have the because we're using the xlookup capability in there. So let's take this first one, to shift control down and down arrow again, and I'm going to do data ribbon, and I'm going to do data validation again, and I want settings, date, and it's going to be greater than, and again I'm going to do equals, the F3 key, choose the R date check, click OK, an error message. Must be a valid date. Boom. On these, I'm going to do shift, select all these, top row there, shift and control, and then the down arrow, and then down arrow again. Data validation, settings, must be a decimal, and it's got to be greater than or equal to 0. So error alert is going to be demand hours must be a valid number. Click OK. And then the data validation, we just need to make sure this is a valid date and it's greater than the start date. So again, to shift and control down and then down again. Data validation options, then data validation, settings, it's going to be a date, and it's going to be greater than or equal to, and again I'm going to do that up arrow there, and I'm going to select that, hit return, error alert, finish, must be a valid date greater than or equal start date. Okay, so that's the data validation now done on our resource demand. One thing I do want to check, so I go into capacity. What I didn't do is put that data validation on the number there as well. We need to make sure that that's a valid number. So again, shift control down, down arrow again, data validation again, settings, decimal, greater than or equal to, well, it's got to be greater than 0. Yeah. Error alert, errors must be a valid number. Boom. Now, so that's all the data validation that we need. In fact, let me just check the data validation on the dates, because I don't think I did those either. I think I've missed them. Just check data validation. No, I didn't do those either. Slipping up here. What's going on? So again, select that first row, do shift control down and down again. Data validation. It's going to be a date, and it's going to be greater than. Hit equals and hit the F3 key. Date check, click OK. Error message. Must be my date. Click OK. Let's do this one. Shift control down, down again. Data validation, settings. Let's choose date. And it must be greater than or equal to, and select that. Again, select that cell there, the start date. Enter that in. Error message. And there you go. Now all the validation's done on the resource capacity. Right. Yeah. Now we can move on. So the last thing that we're going to do is we are going to apply the protection and the data refresh Visual Basic to our sheet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do on the static data, let's just put the buttons in first that we want. So I want, so let's take insert, let's do a text box here. No, I don't want that. In fact, let's just take, if I right click that, do escape, do Control D, and then I just move that over to here. Yeah. And I want this to be protect. So when we want to protect our sheet, we just get rid of the link as well. So remove link so it doesn't keep doing that. So, and then I'm going to make that a little bit smaller like so. Let's change the format. Be do that one, and then let's do Control D to duplicate it. Let's put that there. Just format height, format height. To 8, just make sure it's the same. Right, and then I'm just going to put Unprotect there. Yeah, and let's make that a lighter green like so. Okay, and then I'm going to take that and do Control, let's take this one, do Control D, and this can be for our data refresh. Let's do that. Let's make the font a little bit bigger. So on the home ribbon, let's make that. Yeah. And now format shape here. I'm just going to make the effects preset. Choose that one there. Same with this one. Shape effect preset. Choose that one. No, it didn't. So again, shape preset. Select that one. Let's make that a different color. Shape fill, like so. Okay. So I've now done my buttons. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to save this as a macro enabled spreadsheet before I do anything else to this. So I'm going to do File, Save a Copy, and again I'm just using the same name here, but I'm just going to use this here as a macro enabled workbook, and then hit Saved. So now I can start putting VB against this. So Visual Basic, what we want to be able to do here, and what Visual Basic is going to help us to do here, is when we refresh data, especially when you've got protection on it, you have to do it a couple of times before the full refreshes come through with Power Query and the Power Pivots. But if we use Visual Basic to switch off the protection, do the data refresh, and then reapply the protection, everything happens instantly. And one of the things that we need to be aware of here as well for this to work is now, because everything we've done has gone through a data model. If I go into Queries and Connections and open that up, so if I right click on the calendar and do properties on this, you can see enable background refresh is disabled and it's not ticked. Now, if you weren't using the data model and you wanted to use this with macros, etc., and you want it to be sequenced, then you need to have this unticked. But because we've put it through the data model, it automatically unticks this. So we are fine. All these are added to the data model, as you know. So we don't need to worry about that. So again, if I then close that down, like so, and we're good with all of those. So we don't need to worry about that. But remember that refresh in the background, because if you allow it to refresh in the background, it means Power Query will carry on refreshing and your macro will continue processing. And you don't want that. You want to maintain those sequence of events. Yes, so you want the refresh to be done and then for the code to continue once it's done. So that's why that should be unticked. But because we're using, we've got our Power Queries loaded into the data model, it's automatically disabled. So that, just wanted to make a note of that. Now let's start looking at our code. So the first thing we're going to do, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to now create these buttons, which will then be linked to these macros. Is I'm going to right click on the static data or anywhere on one of these tabs and do view code, and I'm going to create a module here. So up here where you've got this user form here, if I do the drop down, I want to create a module, not a class module, I want to create a module. So I'm going to select that, and then down here in the properties I'm just going to call it MC resources, like so. So there's my module as part of this template. You can double click on it and you should be in that code window. So what we're trying to do here is, first of all, we want to be able to select protect and the whole spreadsheet to be protected. So all those protections and that we've applied in the properties will then come into force to stop our users breaking stuff. But also, if we want to make change or do something, then we want to be able to unprotect it quickly. So we want to be able to do that. for also when we do the data refresh, we want to click that data refresh, and we want the code to recognize that I'm now unprotecting this to execute the data refresh. So we're going to create 3 procedures, and we're going to create a variable, a public variable. So let me declare my public variable, which means it's then it can be read by any of the procedures in here. So I'm going to do public, and it's going to be resource, so res refresh as a boolean. Select that from the drop down. So that's my public variable. Make sure you put some uppercases in there so you recognize it, because a good way to recognize that you've typed something incorrectly is it will then uppercase it as appropriate. So within Visual Basic when you enter it in. So I've done my public variable. So the first procedure is the protection. So let's talk about the protection here. Now, if I do sub to start this off, and it's going to be protect, can't have spaces in here. So I'm going to do underscore resources or resource, and then I'm going to hit return. So now it's created the start and end sub statement automatically for me. So the first thing I'm going to do is I don't want the screen updating. So while it's running the code, I don't want it flicking around pages or anything like that. So I'm going to do application. Can't type today. Application, full stop. And then I'm going to do S. And it's screen updating. Select that. Equals false. And one thing I forgot to mention, I don't know if I mentioned it, but Boolean resources default to a false setting, so we don't have to declare it as false at the moment. So that Boolean there, refresh, is false automatically. I'm then going to put a notice. I'm going to do apostrophe, just so it's always good to put notes in your code. So I'm going to do protect all sheets, like so. So the first one, I'm going to use the with function, so I don't have to keep on typing the sheet name in. So I'm going to do with sheets, open bracket, and this is going to be for summary, like so. And I'm going to tab to indent it. And the first thing I'm going to put on here, so this is our summary sheet. So remember, we don't want anything selectable in here. They only interact with the slicers, so they don't need to select anything. So I'm going to do dot enable. So if I hadn't done that with statement, I would have done sheets, summary, dot, then enable. But because I've done that with sheets, it's assuming that's the first part, this here, of this statement, if that makes sense. If I do selection, like so, and do equals XL, no selection setting, and if I've typed it in right, it'll go uppercase. Now you can see here, this has not gone uppercase. So you can see where I've done the typo, and there you go, it's now gone uppercase, yeah? I'm then going to do protect, and again I want to allow on the summary sheet using pivot tables. I'm going to do colon equals true, because we want them to be able to interact with that pivot table. I'm going to do return. Because I put an apostrophe instead of a full stop, do full stop, and it should then uppercase itself. Wonderful. And now I've done that, I'm going to do end with, like so. So that will now protect that summary sheet with those settings as far as that sheet's concerned. So now let's do capacity. Again, I want the same settings here, except for this one. I want them to be able to select and interact with the pivot table. So let me just take that, do control copy, and then do Control V, and then all I'm going to do is I'm going to change the name to be the capacity. And you can see the sheet names down here. So this is the one we're going to do next, capacity. So within the quotation marks, capacity, and this one here I'm going to do XL, no restrictions. Again, that should uppercase. So that's what we want. So they can select in there and they can drag it, but they can't edit anything in there. It's still protected and they can interact with it appropriately. So now let me do this for the demand and availability and utilization. So let's do that for all those. So let me just enter those in for you. Okay. So I've now done that for down to utilization. So now let's look at static data. So again, I want the same sort of settings, but now, so I want the same settings for static data as well. And I want the same, so let's do that one. So again, just do Control copy that first one as a sample, and I'm going to do, so it's one full stop space, static data, and that's the same. I'm then going to just paste in again, and I want resources. So if I go the resources tab, so 2 resource, see, so it's the same as what's over here. Yeah. So resources. Now, in this one, I don't need the pivot table in here. But what I do want them to do is to be able to, so I don't need that. And I don't need that in static data. So let me get rid of that. All I need it to do is protect it. And then again here, I don't need that. But what I do need in here is I want them to allow, I'll do it lowercase, allow sorting. I'm going to do colon equals true, and then I'm going to do comma and allow filtering colon equals true. If I hit, just click off that, so they've gone uppercase there. Wonderful. And again, for the resource capacity and the resource demand, I want it to be exactly the same as the resources, these two resources. So let me just enter those in as well. There we go. So I've now done those exactly the same. So now we've done the protection for everything. What I'm going to do is just say, right, sheets, quotation mark, 1 static data, quotation mark, move that up a little bit, close that bracket, and I'm going to say activate. Yeah, that should then activate the sheet once it's done, the static data sheet once it's all been done as far as the protection. And then finally, I'm just going to say, right, now that I've done all those changes, application dot screen, and again, I can't spell, application screen updating equals true, and hit return. And then this is where I want to do the check. So if I'm running this as part of my data refresh as well, is I want to check in there to say, well, if the resource refresh, yeah, equals false, then Let's do a then statement. And I don't need to do it on a different line, the output, because I'm not doing an if else statement. So I'm going to do then on the same line, message box. Title is going to be protected. So that's what I want to return as a message. As far as the type of message box, I'm going to do VB, then do I, information. So it's information. Do comma, and then I'm going to put a title here. So I'm just going to do protection. Boom. So now I've done that, I'm going to do debug, compile, see if there's any obvious errors. And now with at the top there, with it in the code, I'm going to press the F8 key, the function 8 key, to step through this to make sure that it works. So if I do F8, it'll highlight, and I keep pressing the F8 to step through. And it'll tell you if there are any problems with what we've just put in here, code-wise. So far so good. I'm stepping through it. And then it should be, now what we got here, we got this here, so that is not right, so it should be res. So let me just change that to S. Right, that's what it should be, res. So it didn't go uppercase, and then it'll give me that message box. Boom, click OK, and then F8 again just to end that sub. So that works. That works. Let me just hit save there. So if I go to here now, everything should be locked. Wonderful. If I look at all these, I should be able to select in there, but there I can't do anything to that. Wonderful. If I go to my summary sheet, again, I can't do anything in there. That all seems to be working. Capacity, yeah, I can't do anything in there. Resources, yeah, so I can't do anything in there, but I can do stuff in here, but I can't change anything up there. Great, so that works. Okay, so let's go back to the code. So now I know that works. The next thing I want to do is I want to be able to unprotect. Yeah. So the unprotect is I don't want to have to type all those things out. So I'm going to do a loop. I'm going to do a for next loop in here. So again, I'm going to do sub. So below the end sub here, I'm going to do sub unprotect. So that's the name of it, and hit return. And again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to declare a variable within here. So I'm going to say dim my sheet as a worksheet. So it is. Return. I'm going to do the application screen updating again. Typed it correctly this time. Equals false. Return. And then a note. So apostrophe unprotect all sheets. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do for each. So my sheet in active dot worksheets. So for each one, yeah, I'm going to do a tab here. I'm going to do my sheet unprotect. Return, and let's do next. So I'll do the next. It'll loop round. So all the worksheets within this active workbook it'll just scroll through them, allocate the name to that, so that my sheet as a worksheet will become that worksheet, and then I can do my sheet.unprotect, and I'll just unprotect each one. It'll loop through them all the way through this workbook. And again, once I've done that, I'm just going to go, I'm going to take this one here, I'm just going to copy this, control copy, control V. And then as far as the message is concerned, again, if I just take this one here and do control copy, and I'm just going to alter it slightly. So if refresh equals false, the message box, and I'm going to do just put UN there, as in unprotected, like so. And everything's the same. So now, if I just do F8 to step through it, in fact, let's do the debug first. Do F8. Right, now I could get it just to loop through all those, so I don't have to wait for it. So I'm going to put a stop sign there, clicking in this, so left clicking in this area here on that code there. So now if I just hit the play, it's done everything and then stopped there. So I can then just click on that again to take off that break or that stop, then do F8, get the message, and then F8 again to end it, and done. And again, if I go to Excel there, you can now see that everything I can type in there now because it's all unprotected. So that works. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to do the shift key, hold down my shift key, select these here, and I'm going to do control 1, and on the properties here, size and properties, on the properties they are locked, but I don't want them moving or resizing with cells. I want them to stay where they are, and I'm just going to click off them. Wonderful. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click on this one, assign macro, and it's within this workbook, and I'm going to do protect resource and click OK. And then on this one, right click on it, and I'm going to assign macro, and I'm going to choose unprotect resource sheet and click OK. So now when I do that, it's protected everything, and I can't do anything in there anymore. If I unprotect it, I can now, and there you go, done. So now let's take care of our data refresh. So again, I'm going to go right click here and do view code, resources. So the last bit that I want to do is do the refresh of our data. And let's bring all that together. So now if I do, let's call this sub refresh underscore resource underscore data, hit return. And again, so what I'm going to do here now is I'm going to set that resource refresh variable going to equal true. Yeah. So I'm going to make that true. And then I'm going to call the unprotect this procedure. So if I take that name there, do control copy, and then just place it in control V there, it's what it's going to do. It's going to set the variable, which means then if this is true here on the unprotected, it won't bring this message box up. It won't do that. Yeah. And then as far as the let's put a note in here. So I'm going to do refresh pivot data, like so. And then all I'm going to do is do active workbook dot, I'm going to do refresh all, like so. And then once I've refreshed it all, remember I talked about not allow it to refresh in the background. That's unticked, and because we've loaded everything into the data model, it's disabled anyway. Is then once that's done, we want it to then reprotect all the sheets. So again, if I go up to the top of here and take this title here, do Control copy and scroll back to that procedure, and I do Control V, and then as far as that's then protected, I'm going to do a message box. So I'm going to do resource capacity, planner, data, refresh to close those quotation marks, do the comma, it's going to be VB information again, and then title is going to be data, refresh, close those quotation marks, boom, job done. Now if I do debug, compile, it all looks fine. So let me just save that. I'm going to close that down, that Visual Basic, and what I'm going to do on this, I'm going to do Unprotect, and then I'm going to right click on this. I'm going to assign the macro, again in this workbook, and it's going to be refresh resource data. Click OK. And I'm going to click Protect. So let's just quickly go through this now. So everything seems to be working. Yeah, that's all refreshing fine. If I take Eddie Murphy, just an example, he's not in there. Great. Yeah, this all seems to work fine. Yeah, demand. Great. So if I then go to resource capacity, let's take Eddie Murphy. Let's do 01/01/24. Let's take it 31st/12/24. I'm going to highlight these here. I'm going to do 8. Control Enter. Make that 0, 0. So that's done. There shouldn't be anything else in there. Great. So that's fine. If I then go to resource demand, and let's take program C. Let's look at what projects are in there. Let's do project 12, and again I'm going to do 01/02/24, and what I'll do is I'm just going to put that to 5, do Control Enter, do 0, 0, and then let's do that to the 31st of December 24, and let's do Eddie's a project manager, I believe. There he is. Done. Now all I should have to do now is go to my static data. So at the moment when I look at my summary and I do Eddie Murphy, there's nothing there for Eddie. So if I just take that filter off, I go to my static data and do refresh data, see what it does. Done. Click OK. I go to my summary, then I look at Eddie Murphy now, and there you go, there's data against Eddie. So Eddie's in there, you can see the times that we've entered and so on. You can see this has all changed as well. And there you go. So there we have our resource capacity planning template, and that is the end of this training series. Hopefully you found it helpful and informative, and you've learned some new tricks, especially around the data validation and the Visual Basic. If so, please remember to click that like, subscribe and smash that notifications button for future content. I wish you a wonderful day wherever you are in the world. Please take care, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video from Change Tips and Tools. Bye bye now.